The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the true mind of the Tathagata. Today is the second day of this June 7-day session in 2023 here at Mountain Gate in northern New Mexico. It's day 2, and day 2 can come with a little less peacefulness, unless, of course, you're a long-time practitioner. And then you know that there are ups and downs in practice. There's ups and downs in life. There's ups and downs in sensations in your body. And in general, you've learned how to really surf it by tuning so deeply in that there's nobody finding any problems. But earlier in one's practice, after the beginning day, when we are just kind of getting our sea legs going as far as sesshin, and where it may be initially relatively peaceful, although we might find ourselves with some body aches because we're not accustomed to sitting for long periods of time, but then that begins to pass. And then we find that there are sometimes uncomfortable feelings coming up. Sometimes we find it's difficult to focus our minds. And it's important to take this as a wonderful challenge in our practice and just dive in to the sensations in our body with exploration of those sensations, not through our analysis, our intellectual analysis, but through simply feeling and being curious. Most of us go through life only feeling the most intense sensations, and usually we try to avoid them by jumping into our heads and reacting out of whatever is going on. We don't like discomfort. We don't like. That is the source of suffering, not liking, not wanting. This was one of the things the Buddha pointed out, that life is characterized by pervasive discomfort, as the Theravadins often will translate it into English. There are times when everything is peaceful and clear, although these days, with all the chaos in the world, there are most likely fewer times for people and bigger challenges as well. But then the Buddha said, the reason why we suffer is because we're attached to things. We want things to be the way we want them to be, and we don't want them to be the way we don't want them to be. And we can try to force our minds into accepting a situation, but it usually is done through distancing from it in order to look good. See, I'm calm, clear, and collected, even though it's a challenging moment for me. But in reality, we have the capacity within us to be truly free. And that these things come up is the wonderful opportunity for becoming free of them. As I said before, we usually try to avoid, try to distract ourselves, try to distance ourselves from whatever it is that is moving through our bodies, and it doesn't really work. What we're doing is we're kind of stuffing them into a back closet or the back end of a drawer and then locking the drawer. They don't go away that way. They stay festering in the background and, without us realizing it, driving our interactions, which are so much more often reactions to situations, things, people, and so on. But yesterday in Teisho, I spoke of the deepest way of practicing. So on the second day, when things begin to sort of rumble in the background, instead of trying to barricade yourself against them, instead, open to the possibility that you may not really know what's going on. Maybe it is something that is worth opening to. And again, we're staying out of our heads because that's not going to solve anything. What we want to do is to become curious about the sensations in our body. And again, through a sense feeling, because that's where liberation can come from. That brings me to one of the Bodhisattva vows. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to liberate them. Now, literally, we can assume that what this means is we're going to go out on the street corners and praise the chance for freedom through Buddhist practice, or we're going to go proselytizing some other way. But that's not what it means. It's not at all what it means. The sixth patriarch, when he finally came out of hiding and the deep maturation he was undergoing in the years after he was officially made the sixth patriarch, was finally found out when he went to hear a lecture, and the abbot of the temple that the lecture was being held at recognized him, and instead of doing the lecture, asked him to step up and speak, teach. And so he did. And one of the things he said, he was the one that first enumerated those Bodhisattva vows, and he said that liberating all sentient beings means liberating, and here I'm going to paraphrase a bit, caught places in our minds. Liberating our habit patterns that lead to dysfunctional behavior. Liberating our assumptions that are not accurate. Liberating our conditioning, which is often so full of misunderstanding, misperception, and a lack of being able to really comprehend what's going on. So this is what we're doing on these days in Sesshin. We are tuning in, experiencing where we're caught, not necessarily needing to know even what we're caught in. That's not necessary. That's an intellectual answer, which will not free us. The way to become free is simply to tune in to the sensations and to use that different part of our mind that is able to comprehend without words, able to understand situations without turning them into puzzles, able to function even if we have no speech. And tuning in, we gradually, especially as Sesshin goes along, begin to encounter these different places where we are caught in our ideas, thoughts, assumptions, conditioning, and so on, and to explore. Wordlessly, of course, that's the only way to really do that. To wordlessly explore, to sense, to feel out, as if you're traveling in a strange place in the middle of the night on foot, and you don't really have a sense of where you're going. You don't know where you're going. You may have an intellectual idea. Yes, I'm going over to such and such a place, but the actual sense of the travel, if we stay in our heads, is not really going to get us very far. Sure, we may somehow figure out how to turn left at the third corner and so on and so forth. But if you're going through the forest at night, as I'd mentioned in the last day show, to be able even to find your way through the trees and the brush and away from dangerous animals and so on and so forth, that's the sense that you want to use. There's a koan that speaks to this. Actually, there's two koans. It takes you back to the village. It leads you back to the village on a moonless night. So there you are, out in the middle of somewhere, and you have to get back home. And there's no streetlights and no moon, and you just have to have your way sort of sensed out. And you can. Jacques Lutheran, and here I bring him up again, learned very early after being blinded at age 8 that he could sense his way around. He could move freely among strange places. He could move freely in his house without bumping into the furniture, for example. But if he found himself irritated, angry, jealous, it interfered with that, and he'd bump into all kinds of things. But when he allowed himself to be clear in his mind, free through tuning in, if anything began to arise, then he was able to move about freely. He even went hiking with his friends in the mountains. I assume that at least for part of those hikes, he had a hand that was leading him, but in general, he could walk down a city street and tell you, oh, there's a wall over there about 10 feet away, and it looks like it's about 8 feet tall, and there's a tree on the other side of that wall. He couldn't see. His eyes had been destroyed by that accident, but he had understood from a deeper level, and we all have that deeper level through which to understand. As we do that, as things come up for us, and they will eventually, they might not do it originally, but they do eventually, then we begin to become free of whatever those things are. That is liberating sentient beings. Sentient has to do with thought. There's another deeper level to that vow, and that is there is no gap between beings, things. It looks like it, and of course, if you run out in front of a speeding car, you're going to find out the hard way that things do have form. It's important to respect that. But at the same time, there is an emptiness that can be realized, and it's not a blankness, it's not, sometimes it's called the void, but that implies nothing there. Whereas this emptiness is a rich potential. The scroll behind me, if you can see it behind the Kuan Yin figure, up on the top is an enso representing our true nature, perfect, whole, complete, lacking nothing. Nothing to be added to it, nothing to be subtracted from it. Universal, eternal, undying, unborn. Beneath it is written in Chinese characters called kanji by Mitra-roshi, abbot of Sogenji, this: out of not one thing arise the 10,000 things. Out of not one thing arise the 10,000 things. In other words, out of this potent emptiness, everything comes forth in its own time. This is actually the same as it says in the Bible, in Genesis, I believe, about God making the earth and all things therein. If you substitute the word God for the absolute, for true nature, for emptiness, and the rest of it that is created through that as form, you have form as emptiness. Emptiness is form. It's a difficult thing to wrap your head around, but as you go deeper in your practice, you will begin to get a whiff of what it really means. And when you do, it begins to become liberating in many ways, so that as you continue to deepen, once you've had at least a little insight into that, when things come up, you'll be able to see both sides, the form side and the emptiness side. And you won't be so caught in whatever it is that would have grabbed you before. Now, take that further. It's known that we are all energy. Everything is energy. The bricks on the floor in the zendo here, the mud walls, we sitting on these tons, the sounds outdoors, meadow outside the door, the lights, the electricity, the quality of light, the sounds. It's pretty windy today. Everything is just more or less concentrations of energy. So the form that is a more major concentration of energy is seen, felt. It's the kind of thing where you're not going to run out in front of a car because there are negative consequences. And because there's no barriers between us, whatever is in our mind state is communicated, in essence, throughout the universe. Maybe you've had the experience of walking into a room and there's a particular energy in there. Somebody's angry or somebody's deeply sad, and immediately you can understand that energy. Nobody has to tell you that there's somebody in here that's angry or sad. You feel it. And so the more clear and let go you are through seeing where you're caught and tuning in and exploring wordlessly the sensations in your body that reflect that, until you have a sense of ease and release, and this can take a while. That freedom from being caught in those communicates itself as well. And so this is another deeper understanding of liberating all sentient beings. In that case, one would say liberating all beings, not necessarily sentient ones. Who we are as human beings is so much more than we have ever thought, than we can ever thought, actually, than we can ever write about. And this is why it's really impossible to describe accurately an awakening experience. There is a knowing that comes forth and a dropping away that brought about that knowing. We reach a point in our mind through our assiduous practice where we have gone deeply enough into, we don't know what, into the experience of life, into the experiences of the senses, the body. And suddenly an insight comes forth. And we are a bit more free than we were and hopefully vastly inspired to continue this work, because we can become even more free through continuing that work. Dogen Keegan, who is considered to be the founder of Soto Zen in Japan, was originally, he was born and raised in Japan, and initially was, I believe, in the Tendai sect, and found that that was not freeing himself to the point where he wanted to become free, and eventually went into a Zen monastery where the abbot had been in China. And the abbot died, but the new abbot decided to go to China to become trained there as well. And Dogen went along with him. There's a quite inspiring video available on Amazon.com, I believe. It's Japanese produced, so it is in Japanese. However, it is got subtitles, and you can read about his life. It is so inspiring, that movie, that when we first saw it and took the video to Hidden Valley Zen Center to begin a sesshin, people had said, "This makes me want to sit." And so the first evening of sesshin, instead of the opening ceremony, we watched the movie. So Dogen went to China, traveled around a bit, and finally settled on one teacher, Chentong Rujing, and came to a deep awakening experience through being there. You know, nobody can wake us up. If we're ripe, someone can, as they say, speak a turning word, but we have to be ripe for that to happen. We have to be ready to open and to let go. But he was. And soon after that, he returned to Japan and began teaching in Japan against a lot of chaos, against a lot of objections. His temple was actually burned out at one point by a competing sect, and yet he was able to teach. He did not live that long. I think he died at 53 of some sort of illness. We don't know what it was, but that lineage has come down to the present day in Japan and also in the United States. Dogen famously wrote, "To study the way, the Buddha way, is to study the self." To study the self is to forget the self, because you're so absorbed in those sensations in your body with that openness to possibility. You don't know what you're going to find or if you're going to find, but there's great potential there, and you have a sense for that. And to forget the mind is to become enlightened by the 10,000 things. To become enlightened by the 10,000 things is to remove the barrier between self and other. It takes work. It takes years. But it is incredibly worth it. And then we keep going, because we can go even deeper. We can go even deeper. What results is a human being who is eventually let go to the point where there's nothing that can catch us, no matter what comes into our life. We are free. There is a story of the Chinese master who became famous He was a deeply enlightened master, but his fame spread to the capital, and the emperor asked him to come and teach the court. But this master refused, because if he went to teach the court, he would be leaving his dedicated students, his committed students who really were willing to work, for an effete bunch of people who just wanted a sort of a badge on their letterhead or something by having a famous teacher teaching them. They wouldn't be that interested, and he understood that. So he said no, and that angered the emperor, who demanded that either he come or he was going to be put to death. And the master said, no, I can't leave my dedicated students, but I beg you to offer me a week of reprieve, and then I will present myself to be executed. And so he did. During that week, I can't remember whether it was a week or 2 weeks, at any rate, that short period of time, he wrote down everything he could think of in terms of teaching to leave behind for his students, so they would continue to have some level of guidance from him. And then he presented himself to the court. Now, China's an enormous country. He could have run and hidden. He could have disappeared relatively easily, and yet he didn't. His take was that there was some kind of karmic hindrance from his back, perhaps many lives back, but somewhere in his history, that he would be paying off if he did go ahead and present himself and be executed. So when he did, he wrote a poem just before the sword came down on his neck, and it was something like, "The sword cutting through my neck is no different from the spring wind." This man had absolutely no fear. Why? Because he understood what life and death really is, and understood that while the swordsman could take him out of this life, take this body away, who he really was could never be killed. And he had reached an understanding of that to the depth that he was able simply to respond in that way. I hope none of us will end up in such a position, but one never knows, really. And the important thing is that he had reached such a deep place in understanding that he had no attachment to his body, to his life. He wasn't dissociating. He wasn't distancing himself from the reality that he was going to have his head chopped off. He just had understood that there was a so great, deeper truth that it was not going to be a problem to him. It's interesting that Socrates, apparently, having been condemned to death by drinking the hemlock poison, when he was lying there waiting to die and his students were weeping around him, he said, "Why are you weeping? You have no idea what I might find. For all I know, it could be something quite wonderful." And the many monks over history, the many people over history who have died without regret, without anxiety, without fear, and simply let go. What is it that they knew? We can understand it deeply ourselves and become just as free. It does take the challenging work of being willing to walk into where we are caught. And if we do that sufficiently and let go sufficiently, which this extended out breath combined with the openness to possibility will lead us deeply into. And using the felt sense, we will become free of whatever these energies could be. They can race through our bodies. It's just energy. And there's no problem once we recognize that, feel it, experience the fact that, for example, feeling anger, we won't be moved to punch somebody or scream at somebody. We will have space around us right as that anger energy is flowing, jumping electrically through our body, that we won't have to react because we're opening ourselves, we're receiving this energy freely without resistance. As we go more and more deeply into our practice, we become more humble as well, because we are beginning to realize that there's nobody that needs to be held in great esteem. There's nobody that needs to be recognized. There's nobody that really is to be embarrassed. That also we begin to realize. And when we do, there is space, deep, peaceful space. And the clarity that comes from no attachment within that space to respond to the situation in the most optimal way. I'd like to share with you now a kind of a curious story. Yesterday I spoke about Obaku, or Bajang, who was Rinzai's teacher. And there are a number of stories similar to this in China, in the annals of Chinese Buddhism, where somebody would be in distress, for example, although this is not the case with this story. Xu Yun, who was a contemporary Zen master, Chan master as it's called in Chinese, and he died at 120. And because there are such specific records kept in China, it's verified that he was 120 years old because they know his exact birth date and his death date. And not only that, he died after the year before having been brutally beaten by the Red Guards. So he crossed a couple of centuries in China. His father did not want him to become a monk. He was of a wealthy family. In fact, his father arranged for 2 wives to be married to him, but he ended up not continuing that life rather rapidly. He basically ran away and became a monk and wandered all over China, deepening his practice and eventually teaching. And there are Dharma successors in his lineage alive today. So at one point, he was traveling in the winter, and it was near Mount Wutai, I believe. Mount Wutai is famous in China as being the home of Manjusri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom. And he fell into a river or something and got wet, which is pretty bad in the winter, and managed to find a sort of a half-built structure. I think it had 3 walls and a roof, and went in. He got sick. He got quite ill. And another monk showed up and cooked him yellow rice until he became well again, and then simply vanished. So in this case, there's something like that in this story about Obaku. While on his journey to Mount Tiantai, Obaku met another monk. They talked and laughed just as though they were old friends who had known each other for many years. Their eyes gleamed with delight as they then set off traveling together. Coming to the fast rapids of a stream, they removed their hats and took up staffs to walk across. The other monk tried to lead Obaku across, saying, come on over. Obaku said, if elder brother wants to go across, then go ahead. And the other monk then began walking across the top of the water, just as though it were dry land. The monk turned to Huangbo and said, come across. And Huangbo yelled, "Ah, you self-saving fellow. If I'd known this before, I would have chopped off your legs." And the monk cried out, "You are truly a master of the Mahayana. I can't compare with you." And saying so, the monk vanished. Huangpo didn't need to be famous. He didn't need to do things like walk on water. He was simply who he was. And we work through our practice to be simply who we are, without any appendages such as conditioning that makes us skew our thinking, or challenges in life that give us an attitude. As we gradually let go of these things, it communicates around us. One of the odd things I found after I've been practicing for some years, I was still in Rochester, it was before we moved to Santa Fe, was that when I would go out to Mendon Ponds, to the park, that I'd be walking across a field, and I had to be very careful because the little mice, snakes, and various other animals didn't get out of my way. That's not the same as it was before I'd done some years of Zazen. What made the difference? Find that difference in yourself and become free. I thank you for listening. We'll stop now and recite the 4 vows.